Next up, we would like to invite, looks like there's quite a bit of staff from the Legislator Audit General's office. There we have Wayne, Kidd, and if you...
There's a posse.
Whoa, we've got... Wow. Did you guys find parking okay? And did you bring a bus? Laura's really good to... Oh, you're going to block? Yeah, don't put that in front. Yeah, he's going to...
Aaron Underwood is actually probably the one in charge.
So, Underwood, you're the ranking person here, so you're in charge. So you want?
I'm the lowest ranking. So
if you want to introduce,
be happy to.
Your team. Thank you for your patience.
No, we're happy to be here. In fact, Senator Davis, who's on our audit subcommittee, made the motion that we present this to the entire board, which we would have anyway at your request. But it's good to be here. I'm Darren Underwood. I'm the Deputy Auditor General, joined with the audit staff that really did all the legwork on this. We have appreciated being among you. It's a collaborative environment when we come down and audit at the Board of Education. I've worked with many of you before, and it's been a positive experience. We hope that the audit that we present today can be seen as positive and something to grow from. Wayne Kidd was the supervisor. He will present today. Ryan Talene to his left, and Michael Allred were staff on the audit, and they will be able to answer all the questions. So I think our presentation is about 10 minutes. You're welcome to interrupt us as we go. Whatever works best, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I think I'll turn my head and watch your presentation.
Absolutely.
Hopefully they'll...
That's the best part, watching the slides.
There you go.
So we were asked to conduct a performance audit of the history of selected public education programs. We selected 5 education programs. Uh-oh. We had a little... I was working a minute ago. It isn't working.
Maybe while they're...
Oh, there we go.
Oh, we got the technical difficulties worked out. I think it's important to... does everybody have the copy on their computer?
We have a hard copy if you want.
Because we have hard copies as well. Well, since I stole the mic, I was just going to make one comment about having limited this to a small number of programs. We worked for quite a number of weeks with your staff to identify, I think it was over 70 programs that we could use to try to use in our analysis, and it was a productive collaborative approach to really get to the ones that were the highest risk in terms of impact and dollars. So I think we're back up.
Yep, we're back rolling again. All right, back to the slides. So we selected 5 education programs and the school grading accountability system. So chapter 2 of our report summarizes how your strategic plan can be enhanced based on the findings discussed in chapters 3 through 7. In chapter 2, we recognize that the strategic plan has strategies for accomplishing goals at the LEA level, but the plan can be enhanced. You as the board should consider incorporating these oversight principles, defining roles, ensuring compliance, thoughtful planning, timely communication and collaboration, and independent leadership in the strategic plan to effectively implement and operate education programs. Yep.
When we're looking at the programs, what was the catalyst for choosing these? Are these the most amount of money we spend, or are these ones like?
We looked at several risk factors. We took our 70, we went down to 16, we surveyed those, and from those we selected the programs that we felt like had the most risk in terms of oversight or accountability. Do you want to add something?
I was just going to reiterate that we sent this same list to your staff wanted to get their input. I think we had a Google Doc and we said, let's rank these, and we want to talk about the ones that have the most impact. So it wasn't always just necessarily dollars. It could have been how wide-reaching they are, or which ones of them represent, broader education issues. So.
Okay, you good?
So 4 of the 5 programs that we reviewed and the school grading accountability system lack adequate oversight. The strategic plan also needs program and policy level outcome measures for state level accountability to enhance decision making. 4 of the programs that we reviewed lacked adequate outcome measures. We recognize that steps have been taken to improve agency operations by adding the new grants management system and adopting FINET as USB's ledger system, and the improved communication through a reorganizational structuring process. But these changes, along with enhancing the strategic plan, will help encourage cost-effective implementation of programs. Chapter 3 reviews the K-3 reading and improvement program that promotes early childhood literacy. The K-3 reading improvement program overlaps with 2 other early literacy programs in terms of targeted population, objectives, and strategies. And this makes it difficult to determine which programs are providing the most effective outcomes. The overall effectiveness of each of these programs should be evaluated. Chapter 4 reviews the critical language pilot program for secondary students and the dual language immersion pilot program for elementary students. In fiscal year 2010, USB began using legislative appropriations intended to fund both programs to expand dual immersion. In fiscal year 2014, critical languages ceased operations after depleting initial funding received in the fiscal years 2008 and 2009. Both programs were modified outside statutory guidelines. Statute for dual immersion prescribes 4 languages in 15 schools for elementary grades, but dual immersion only implemented 3 of those languages, added 3 more languages, and has programs in 196 schools for 1st through 9th graders. Accountability measures for critical languages never existed, and existing accountability measures for the dual immersion are limited. Dual immersion has operated for 7 years with only 2 outcome measures included in its 2013 annual report. We're concerned that instead of internal measures, the dual immersion program relies on external evidence, including positive media and national research, to justify the program. Evidence-based outcomes for the dual immersion program should be developed. Chapter 5 reviewed the Student Leadership Skills Grant Program that was funded for 3 years. Intermediate data shows that the program was not a high priority to schools. We found that 22 grant awards were not fully spent over the 3 years, and statute requires that schools that are awarded a grant to participate for 2 years in the program. However, 45% of the schools only participated 1 year. Initially, 25 schools participated the first year of the program, but by the 3rd year, only 7 of those schools were still active, a decrease of 72%. The intermediate data should have been reported to the legislature. As a result, the legislature may have made a different policy decision, such as not changing the program from a pilot program to an ongoing program. The evaluation of the program was presented to the legislature in November 2016 after the program was no longer funded. However, the evaluation did not include outcome measures. It mainly consisted of a survey of school staff that participated in the program. Chapter 6 reviews the implementation of the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program. Grant awards were initially distributed this past February to 65 LEAs. The initial rollout of the program was complicated because the timeline was accelerated. The master plan's timeline was to award technology grants to LEAs in the fall of 2017. However, a board rule approved in April of 2016 expedited the process to award the grants by December 2016, and this shortened the implementation by about 8 months. The shortened timeline may not have given LEAs adequate time to thoroughly prepare to qualify for the grant program. Most of the LEA grant applications had to be submitted a second time. Only 6 applications were considered for an award after the first submission date. The board also needed to approve funding for some LEAs to defer implementation to the following year who couldn't meet the deadlines, and 12 LEAs accepted the deferral. Also, the plan requirements had 53 elements that LEAs had to address, and the shortened timeline didn't allow time to revisit those plan requirements. Chapter 7 reviews the school grading accountability system as well as 2 other systems that had existed for school accountability from 2011 to 2016. The school grading system was introduced in the 2011 general session, which required schools to be given a letter grade. In response, the Utah Comprehensive Accountability System, or UCAS, was created, and UCAS did not include a letter grade. However, the UCAS system was used to report on the federal education requirements. In 2012, the governor's office introduced the PACE report, adding a second accountability requirement, and school grading was reintroduced in 2013 and required letter grades for schools. And this resulted in duplication of effort as 3 individual accountability reports were produced for each school for the 4 years. After the 4 years of reporting on 3 systems, collaboration with the legislature took place to create the comprehensive system. The result was Senate Bill 20 in this past 2017 general session. And the bill created a unified accountability system that included elements of the 3 previous systems and eliminated the duplication of effort. However, these programs demonstrate the lack of administrative oversight and accountability principles, and incorporating these principles into your strategic plan will help implement and operate programs effectively, and it will also improve the decision-making process. Thank you.
Just like that, right? all that work. Well, appreciate the presentation, and now this is a time for questions, and hopefully there's a few. Board Member Reeby.
So as a board, we are looking to create a more accountable process. As you present this, is there a fiscal note that you would attach to your recommendations to help us fulfill these accountability obligations? Can we discern a number that might help us ask for money for us to be better prepared to have all these accountable measures in place? So, like, how many staff members might we need for this, or?
What's that?
We didn't
Scott,
actually.
well, Scott can answer that. So, Scott, can you find a chair and come up close, or?
We'll share.
I think Board Member Reeby's asking.
Yes. So the short answer is yes. We would generate that, though. That's by way of the process, and we'll talk more about this in the state fiscal year 19 agenda item related to this, to how this will help us. So that's okay.
So you bet. Follow up. Feel free.
So when we were talking about pilot programs, you alluded to many pilot programs. Do we have maybe a point at where too many pilot programs into our schools is actually ineffective, and can we limit maybe our pilot programs? Because every year we start a legislative session and everybody has great ideas, but when we give too many great ideas to a system that's already overworked, we really don't yield great results. So is there some kind of recommendation of how many programs would be beneficial, and is like a point where it's actually counterproductive?
It's not the actual number of pilot programs. What our concern is looking at the impact of the pilot programs. And we mentioned that in Chapter 2 that, for example, the Student Leadership Skills Program, it started as a pilot program. It was a pilot program for 2 years. It was made an ongoing program for 1 year, and it was no longer funded. And so the question is, should that ever have been an ongoing program? Should it have remained in a pilot status, and some of that intermittent data be reported to the legislature? On the other hand, dual immersion's been going now for several years, and it's a pilot program and remained at pilot program status. So I don't think it's about the number of pilot programs. I think it's more like what's the impact of these programs, and when you have the outcomes and the impact, then you determine whether it should be an ongoing program or or maybe it should be phased out. So I don't think it's about the number. I think it's about impact.
So as we look to make impactful programs, can we attach programs to existing programs and change them instead of creating a different program? Because as a classroom teacher, I start one year with one thing in place, and then the next year I'm given something else, but they never told me that it runs in conjunction with this one. So as a teacher and as a board member, we are not as efficient as efficient in stating our goals, because when you're in the schools and in the classrooms, you're always looking at something as something different, and we're not really aligning it with the goal that we have in mind. So that would be my question about like pilot programs.
I think the concern, you're going to ask something, but I think the concern is when I hear like two running together in conjunction, well, it's great if they work hand in hand, but the concern would be duplication. And that's where you lose the inefficiency. So I think if someone taking a step back and looking and saying, okay, are these have different objectives? Or are they the same objectives and same processes to get there? Then you've got duplication of effort. Do you want to add something as well?
I think maybe this could be a good chance for us to comment on what happened in response to the audit at the end of our audit subcommittee. I know that Vice Chair Ellis was there along with Scott Jones when President Niederhauser held up the audit and said, this is as much a message to the legislature as it is to the board. And I thought that was very telling, because it was the President of the Senate recognizing maybe too many programs are being sent to the Board of Education. And I reminded the audience that our office plays a specific role in the front end of this with the pilot programs, with the performance notes. So every time legislation is proposed, your staff, more than any other state agency, is inundated with performance note requests. The reality is you may not agree with some or half or all of them. So I think this is a good time to refocus, and I know we have the president's support. I know he took this message to at least the Senate Majority Caucus, that sometimes these pilots, if they are a good idea, then your staff can document that, but it may be an opportunity for sometimes legislators as the sponsor to be held responsible or accountable for what they want this pilot to do. One of the biggest challenges we have in the office with our performance note responsibility is we see that something was supposed to end as a pilot and it never ended. And so, but that message seems to be getting lost on the Hill. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's helping, I think, resurrect this area that we need to have as a focus, which I think one of the messages of the audit that maybe wasn't overtly given was just the sheer number of programs that the board is attempting to manage with staff that is run ragged.
Senator Niederhauser recognized that.
Okay, before we get to another one, did you want to follow up Superintendent Dixon, and then we'll go to Vice Chair?
Yes, both before and after the audit subcommittee, we've had conversations with President Niederhauser, with LFAs and others who really work on the performance notes. So we've suggested two things, both privately and publicly, that seem to have gained a lot of support. One is the performance notes. So when President Niederhauser, I think he was the one that sponsored the bill requiring the notes, and his intention, according to the good president, was that it was to be at the onus of the sponsor of the bill to give input into that note, and yet it falls in our laps to do so. So the proposal that we've made is to have the sponsor actually create the performance note and a template that would say, what is the intended outcome? How will this be measured? and what's the time frame around it, putting bands around it. And that would mitigate, in our opinion, a lot of the pilots that go on in perpetuity. So you could name that right in the statute, that it would be a 3-year pilot or a 5-year pilot up for review. And we also feel like it's a way to help the legislators, the sponsors, mitigate some of the frustration that they feel with our good education partners who have lobbyists who bombard our legislators, and I mean, that's their job to do so. They often don't, some things are brought to them and they don't know the answers to all those questions. So if they had the answers to those questions up front, they might then say, you know, this is not worth my running this, or I'm uncomfortable running this bill. So we've been pretty open about this idea, and it's gained a lot of traction, and we'll see what happens. I think some of the bills are already a little far down the road, but at the least we're hoping that when we have the funding bills, Senate Bill 2, House Bill 1, you know, the bill of bills that come out with the funding, that those conversations can be had minimally with things that are in those bills, because what will often happen, we'll get the language or the bill at the 24 hours, 48 hours before the session ends. And there are things in there that we don't even know what they are. And so then we'll have somebody call us and say, hey, where's my money? And we don't even know what they're talking about. And there are no measures, or there's no accountability to it. So that's a conversation that we'll continue to have, and we think is worth merit, placing that intended performance note right at the back in the lap of the sponsor.
Okay. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Thank you for being here today, and it was actually quite an interesting audit to read. I appreciated the connection to our board's strategic plan and pointing out the faults, I guess, that are in our strategic plan. And as I tried to understand kind of what could come out of the audit, what can we do differently based on the findings that were in this particular thing, I thought, well, we can improve our strategic plan. But in doing so, it felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, this audit was telling us to be more assertive in our efforts to oversee these programs. And in some cases, that may mean pushing back towards the legislature and doing so, which I think we have struggled with because of the reaction that we've often received as we've tried to push on certain programs that come through the legislature. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, because of this audit, if that conversation is able to change as we look at our strategic plan and become assertive in this process of saying, here's a program that is currently underway. So for example, and anyone can correct me if I misunderstood this, but the dual language immersion program and is in there. And then you also talked about setting accountability measures. Well, we just recently talked about an assessment that we would use in order to see how effective the dual language immersion program is. But it would cost us, just in our office, to come up with that assessment over $400,000 to develop an assessment in order to see if that program is effective, which wasn't part of the legislation. It wasn't part of the program. There was no funding set aside for it. And so so we run into those problems here as we try to evaluate and understand programs, and as we try to push that back to the legislature. So I hope that this is truly an opportunity both for us to really look at how we can be more effective in running programs, but how we can assert ourselves back in those who create the programs and fund the programs, and making sure that we're all on the same board as far as how to ensure that programs are effective. And I know that much of the conversation so far has been, how do we move forward to ensure that is? But as you've seen, we already have 80 plus programs in statute, and how do we begin the process of asserting that accountability onto those programs that are currently established?
Okay. Board Member Lisa Cummins.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's nice to meet you. And I also want to thank you for this audit report. It's been something that I've looked forward to since I've been involved with education policy, so I'm very grateful that it's here. So you've worked with staff, USBE staff, primarily with this report. Would you be willing to work with board members that have, ideas or, concerns with other programs going forward? I know that I would love to be in those meetings, or, be a part, give ideas of things to look at. And what are your projected, what are you doing forward, or are you doing more for going forward? Are you performing other audits, other programs?
Happy to respond to that. Usually when we complete an audit, we're done, but we are actually still here. You're so lucky. We have an additional request to look at some of the initiative programs, and we would be more than happy to, the staff, come see you. We've kind of scoped out where we're looking there, but we'd love to talk to you to see if maybe we're missing anything. Like I said, we have a great working relationship. We tend to work more with the staff during the audit because everything is protected until we release it.
Sure.
So
and they
if we
can
work,
provide the material.
Yeah, if we work with the entire board, we'd have to have a public meeting.
Sure.
But yes, we can meet with individual board members, and we want to do that.
Okay.
And I know that this audit it's referred to legislative committees. During session, it's not likely that audits are heard just because of the sheer number of bills. Mm-hmm. But it could go to the House or the Senate Education, or wait until interim. We'll have to wait and see. It was referred to all those committees. So,
okay.
Yeah, so we're going to be here. And we actually have another team looking at school secondary fees as well. So
good.
If you have comments on those, we had a legislator that had some concerns about whether extra fees that were being paid for things like choir and that were going where they needed to go. So we'll be very transparent about that.
Thank you.
Board Member Reeby.
As we look at these audits, we look at our schools, and we look singularly at one thing. Can we possibly look to external influences that might have contributed to the success or failure of certain programs? Because when we implement a program in one school and then we implement it in another school, we determine that it might have been the teacher or the school that wasn't doing the job, when really there might have been outside influences that might have adversely impacted it or positively impacted it. And I think that really skews the data of what's successful and what's not successful sometimes. Is there like a variable in there that looks at the external factors of?
Well, just when you look at different programs, I think we always want to consider external influences, external factors, in the data, what's happening. So when we do our audits, we always try to consider, what are the other things happening out there. But in this case, there weren't a lot of outcome measures for us even to look at. So our point was we need to first get those established. So as you're working on establishing outcome measures, I think definitely you want to include those factors as part of that analysis. So whoever's doing that work.
Board Member Cannon.
I'm going to piggyback on Board Member Reeby's comment, because I'm just sitting here thinking about something that is exemplary of what she's talking about. So the K-3 reading program, I believe, got $15 million, and it was brought into existence when Olin Walker was governor, and she more or less fell on her sword to get that money for us. It was based on research telling us that if we could get all kids reading on grade level by third grade, that they would be successful in the rest of their school career. So we're thrilled. We get this money. We've moved forward. Governor Walker is not reelected. So, just right out of the chute, we have a different governor, different priorities. But all along, we have increasing numbers of school children in our system, which dilutes the money that we can pay to utilize to get them reading. And so then you come and say to us, well, you're not really showing any outcomes for this money. And I just think, how could we possibly? The money did not keep up with the kids that it was supposed to service. And, there were outside factors that nobody really could control. So when she says, yeah, there are factors beyond, us just not proving that this is effective. I mean, it's kind of, unless you begin with the end in mind and agree to keep funding this to see whether or not it's effective, it kind of doesn't have a chance.
And I think you were probably making a comment more than asking for an answer, but I will add that, we didn't talk about, or we didn't recommend any changes in funding in terms of, but those continuous outcome measures are so crucial. But I know a lot of the feeling of the board is on external influences. It's not just at the school level, but it's at the board level. Vendors have programs they want to implement and whatnot. We're very aware of that. It's difficult in an audit to really address that topic, but we're sensitive to that. That's why we're so excited that we can report to the board this, the feeling that the president has about moving forward with maybe an enhanced partnership on accountability and oversight principles. So, and getting more to the front end. That performance note legislation was actually designed, like the superintendent said, for the sponsor to have the accountability of the measures.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you being here, and it's good to have this kind of audit. Maybe not everybody's going to agree with everything that's in it and that, but what's amazing about this particular audit, as it's moving forward, at least on our end, we can see the betterments in the discussions, and so there are some positive outcomes and actions, and hopefully we can capitalize on all of those. And so I appreciate your good work on
Thank you.
on this. And I don't know if that happens very often to auditors, but so thank you, and hopefully this is not only is this on the front burner for our organization, but the legislature and that movement. It appears it started that way. Hopefully we can keep it there. So thank you. With that, I think we're done, unless you have any questions of us moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your report and you being here. You're welcome to stick around. We've got some interesting stuff this afternoon. So thanks.